Welcome back. Now, earlier this week, a triage was set up outside an underage disco in Cork to deal with teenagers suffering ill effects of alcohol consumption. Given that is the time we look at our approach to drinking in the country.
Well, joining us to discuss this morning is consultant gastroenterologist Dr. Anthony O'Connor from Tallaght Hospital and Finnfall TD Declan Bratnock. Good morning to you both.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Anthony, I'm going to come to you first. Underage drinking and alcohol abuse, nothing new, I think we're all going to agree, but the situation we saw unfold this week and dominate news stories across the week, Anthony, was kind of a new low, wasn't it? And a frightening situation where we saw triage and a hospital set up in a field, ultimately.
It was a real shocker, Anna. I think since time immemorial, teenagers have experimented with things that maybe not supposed to do, but there's a whole jump from there to having to set up a field hospital in the field outside a rugby club of a teenage disco. And it certainly tallies with what I'm seeing in clinical practice. I've been in gastroenterology now for 12 years nearly. And when I started off in liver disease, the people who came in with liver disease were gnarled older men who'd sort of led hard lives and worked in the ships and the docks and things. Now it's people coming in their late 20s, early 30s with liver failure. And it's a total paradigm shift in that time.
And to get to a point where you're suffering liver failure, the liver and the body takes a lot of abuse to bring you to that point, doesn't it?
Everybody seems to have a different threshold. The female liver certainly seems to be a little bit more vulnerable than the male liver to the effects of alcohol. But I guess for many ways it can relate to what people perceive as problem drinking. If it's what everybody else around you is doing, to have 4 or 5 pints every night, you may not consider that a problem, but that's 3 or 4 times the recommended limit per week. Similarly with people drinking lots of wine during the week and things like that, it all adds up and takes a toll. And it can be hard to communicate that to patients.
Of course.
Declan, the health bill is currently under discussion, and it's clear that things need to change, but there seem to be differing points of view on what needs to change. In your opinion, where are we going wrong and what do we need to look at immediately?
Well, the public alcohol bill is around the dolls since 2015, and hopefully it'll go into legislation before the end of the year. Look, we have a serious problem with binge drinking. I'm not sure that the alcohol bill will address that. I think what Anthony's saying here is about making people more aware of alcohol consumption. I think it's a serious issue, but it's preventable. The public alcohol bill clearly looks at the issue of labelling, the issue of its presence in your stores, and trying to make it less obvious as something that you're going to pick up and buy. But the whole issue of minimum unit pricing, I think, will certainly help, and that's where obviously, as opposed to below cost selling, minimum unit pricing, when it's brought in, will make it, and it's been found out by research, will help. Obviously, hopefully control that abuse.
So less incentive to buy alcohol in bulk and cheap booze, basically?
Absolutely. But I have to say, it's no good bringing it in here in Ireland unless it's brought in the north of Ireland as well, because you'll end up with your booze buses again, heading up, getting it at a reduced price.
Are the advocates of changing the labelling, are they trying to go as far as what has happened with cigarettes, where they're completely invisible almost in supermarkets now?
I've expressed concern about the degree to which the labelling is going to happen, because I think this has to happen unilaterally. If there is a problem, as it's been proven, and Dr. Anthony here is clearly saying it, liver failure and the incidences on the increase, particularly with younger people. But that labelling should be across the board, not just in Ireland. Are we going to send our products out to Europe and out to the Middle East, where we have massive markets, telling people it's unsafe to drink our Irish whiskey, yet the Scotch whiskey and all the other whiskies that are out there, the message will be sending back that we're producing a more inferior product. If there's an issue with alcohol in Ireland, and there's an issue right across the world, yes, we do need to put up proper labelling, but it needs to be done unilaterally.
We're losing our competitive edge against similar brands in that same category overseas. Would you agree with that, Anthony?
I would come at it from a slightly different perspective. I think what's in the public health alcohol bill aims to reduce consumption by about 20%. So that's getting the average Irish person from drinking just under 4 gallons of pure alcohol a year to about 3. So it's not loch derg. And regardless of what's going on in other countries, we have a huge problem with this here. About 2% of our GDP is spent on alcohol-related harm. 2,000 beds a night in Irish hospitals are taken up by the consequences of alcohol abuse. So 1.2 billion is spent in the health service on
Give us
alcohol.
that stat again about the hospital beds.
About 2,000 beds a night.
A night?
A night. 25% of all injuries presenting to accident and emergency departments are alcohol related. And the health service spends 1.2 billion a year on alcohol-related harm. To put that in context, that could fund Tala Hospital, St James's Hospital, the Mater Hospital, Vincent's and Blanchardstown Hospital for a year.
Isn't that just infuriating when you think about all the people, all of our loved ones who have spent time in corridors on trolleys when they could have been in those beds and they've been taken up by alcohol abuse situations?
So for ourselves, we have to do something about it. And I certainly take Declan's point on board. The drinks industry does employ a lot of people. These are well-respected and important Irish brands. But I think a sense of perspective has to be brought into. We're trying to get from just under 4 gallons of pure alcohol per year per person down to about 3. I think it's sensible and proportionate.
So is it a case that the message isn't getting through in terms of the drink responsibly campaigns?
I, as a former school teacher, would say that the public alcohol bill will not address the abuse and the misuse of alcohol. I think there's a clear education programme needed right down at primary level. It's interesting, the statistics.
It also needs to be at home as well as at school, though, doesn't it? It needs to be driven from both sides, from a child's perspective.
There's an interesting aspect on that, that the Lancet Journal, which many of you would be familiar with, they did a bit of research in Australia in relation to this issue of responsible drinking and drinking at home, and where parents actually who introduced children to drink and drink responsibly at an early age did not necessarily solve the issue. So it's about getting a message across, I think, from a health aspect of it. And I think an interesting further statistic on the whole thing is that I've done a calculation that for every unit of alcohol drank, it's costing the state, in terms of whether it's crime, hospital beds, something of the order of €1 for an average drink, in terms of crime, hospitalisation, and indeed workplace practices and people not turning up for work.
But the whole message, chaps, it's not even about the drinking, it's our attitude to drink. And that's in our DNA, because we've had generations of it. It's our attitudes towards drinking, and in particular binge drinking. I think, and the age at what binge drinking is starting.
Do you think the sponsorship in sport, Anthony, where are you at with that?
I'll give you an example. There was a rugby match yesterday, took place between the Dáil rugby team and the Gardaí, and it was sponsored by a nightclub. And all the branding for nightclubs and the photographs behind them. So you look at this and you're kind of, as somebody in the front, and you're going, guys, are you serious about this? You know, in France, it's had a big effect.
But that's what makes me, we talk about the drink industry, and there are a lot of jobs there. But there's a lot of jobs in the cigarette industry that people don't really, we're not trying to protect those jobs, because we inherently know that is a cause of death. Now, we're not saying alcohol is, but why is the attitude different to protecting that industry?
I think, it's obviously a bit of an extreme example. If you look in America, what happens around the gun control debate, you've got a group of people who, enjoy using guns for whatever reason and don't see themselves as a problem because some people use it to excess. I think that's almost a microcosm of how we feel about alcohol. And we need to sort of step outside of that mindset for a little bit and say, the government has an onus and a responsibility to act in the interests of the citizens. It's really heartening to hear that Declan has obviously read a lot about the subject. He's up to date with the medical literature. It actually gives me real hope to know we've got people like that in Dáil Éireann who are making themselves aware of all these things. But we can't just legislate our way out of it. You're absolutely right, Simon. We have to have a cultural shift as well. I mean, drink's at the heart of everything we do.
It is, absolutely.
Like, team wins in All Ireland. We'll see a
team loses in All Ireland.
Yeah, or we'll see us all in wherever. Yeah. And I mean, alcohol is the centrepiece of our weddings, our funerals, our christenings, people leaving work, things like that. We just have to look at it a different way. And again, I can't stress enough, we're not looking at Loch Derg. We're just sort of looking at getting from a very, very high to somewhat less high consumption.
And manage it.
It's about getting a balance as well, because I come from a rural constituency where the grain is grown by the farmer. You have your the brewery. You take Cooley Distillery I mentioned, and the many gin.
Stories.
And indeed craft brewers. It has become a tourist attraction in itself, but we've got to get the balance between acting responsibly, and I think there's nobody disagreeing that we have a problem here. We're the third biggest binge country by the World Health Organization statistic, and indeed the CSO tell us that 18 and 24 is the age where binge drinking is
Well,
happening.
Dr. Anthony O'Connor and Declan Bannock TD for Louth Fianna Fáil, thank you very much for joining us this morning.